Julian Croft walked into the building on a Monday morning like he owned it, which technically he did not. But no one had told him that yet. I watched him from the corridor outside the conference room. This man in his late 30s, wearing a tailored jacket and sporting hair product that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, was scrolling his phone with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from never having been told no. He was the son-in-law of our chief executive officer. He had married into Zenith Bioformulations 8 months ago, and now apparently he was going to run it. My name is Evelyn Cross. I was 31 years old when I joined Zenith as a junior formulation chemist. That was 19 years ago. I want you to understand what 19 years looks like from the inside. It does not feel like a long time when you love the work. It feels like Tuesday, then Wednesday, then a decade has passed. I had worked through 2 chief executive officers, 4 corporate restructures, 1 near bankruptcy, and a regulatory crisis. I had stayed late when everyone else went home. I did all of that because I believed in what we were building, a pharmaceutical compounding company that genuinely served patients in regional areas of Oregon who could not access standard medications. That was the company I had joined. That was the company I had supported with everything I had. Julian Croft did not care about any of that. He was appointed Chief Operations Officer in March. There was no announcement, no formal process. One afternoon, the outgoing Chief Operations Officer, a woman named Beatrice Dale, who had mentored me for 6 years, quietly cleared her desk. The following morning, Julian had her office, her parking space, and a new title on a plaque that someone had installed overnight. When I asked the Human Resources Department whether there had been a selection process, the woman across the desk looked at her screen and said the position had been filled internally. I said, "He has never worked in pharmaceutical manufacturing." She said, "He has a background in hospitality management." I waited for her to laugh. She did not. The first all-staff meeting Julian ran was in April. He stood at the front of the room and told us that Zenith had been operating from a scarcity mindset and that he intended to shift us toward a growth-first culture. He used the word pivot 4 times in 11 minutes. He talked about scaling revenue streams and optimizing client touchpoints. He did not once mention compounding accuracy, regulatory compliance, or the fact that we were producing medications that went directly into human bodies. One of our senior compounding technicians, a quiet man named Walter Finch, who had been with the company longer than me, raised his hand and asked about the new production targets Julian had distributed. The targets required us to increase batch output by 40% within 6 months. Walter said, "With our current cleanroom capacity, that timeline creates a contamination risk." Julian smiled. "That is the kind of fixed mindset we are moving away from, Walter." Walter looked at me. Neither of us said anything else. By June, I had submitted 3 written concerns to the operations team about the production schedule. Each one was acknowledged with a 2-line reply that said my feedback had been noted. By July, Julian had reorganized the quality assurance reporting structure so that quality assurance flagged to him directly instead of to the technical director. By August, he had removed the pre-batch review sign-off that our chief formulation officer, Dr. Alistair Ross, had implemented 15 years earlier after a dispensing error that had hospitalized a patient. Dr. Ross had retired the previous year. I was at that point the person who understood his system most deeply. I had helped build it. I had spent 3 years refining the verification protocols with him, cross-referencing them against federal regulations, stress-testing them against edge cases until they were as close to foolproof as a human system could be. Julian called them legacy red tape. I called them the reason we had not hurt anyone in 15 years. In September, I was called into his office at 9:14 in the morning. I remember the time because I had just come from a batch verification, and I still had my lab coat over my arm. His assistant had rung my desk while I was mid-process and said it was urgent. Julian was sitting behind Beatrice's old desk. He did not offer me a seat. He said, "Evelyn, I want to be upfront with you. This is not personal." I had heard those 4 words before. They are always the warning sign. He told me that Zenith was undergoing a structural realignment, that my role as principal formulation chemist was being disestablished, and that my position was surplus to the new operational model. He handed me an envelope and said Human Resources had prepared my final entitlements. I looked at the envelope. I had 19 years in this building. I had developed formulation protocols that were still in use today, methodologies that underpinned everything Zenith produced. I said, "Are you aware of the intellectual property assignment provisions in my original employment contract from 2006? I would recommend you review them before finalizing anything." He gave me a patient smile. The kind you give someone you have decided is not worth confronting. Human Resources has everything in order, Evelyn. I nodded. I picked up my lab coat. I said, "Have a good morning, Julian." I walked back to my desk. I packed my personal items into a single box, a photograph of my family, a small succulent, and a mug that said, "Keep calm and check your references." I said goodbye to Walter, who hugged me without saying anything. I did not cry, not because I was not devastated, but because I had learned that the moment you show someone you are broken, they stop seeing what you built. I walked out of the building at 10:48 in the morning with my box and 19 years of knowledge that no one had thought to investigate. What I had not told Julian, what I had decided somewhere between his office and my desk to let him discover for himself, was something that had been true since before I ever walked through Zenith's doors. In 2003, I was 22 years old and doing my honors year in pharmaceutical science at Oregon State University. For my research project, I developed a stability testing methodology for complex multi-compound formulations, specifically for medications that required precise interaction modeling between active ingredients that did not ordinarily play well together. The methodology addressed a known gap in how small compounding operations handled batch consistency for high-risk formulations. My supervisor at the time, Dr. Irene Cole, encouraged me to formalize the work. I spent another 14 months refining it after graduation. In early 2005, I filed a patent application in my own name, my maiden name, Evelyn Brooks. The patent was granted in 2006. It covered a specific class of stability testing and interaction modeling protocols for pharmaceutical compounding operations. It was registered under United States Patent Number 7,123,456. In November 2006, I joined Zenith Bioformulations as a junior chemist. I had been married 3 months earlier and was using my married name, Cross. In the complexity of starting a new job and a new life simultaneously, I had not updated the patent registration. It remained under Evelyn Brooks. In 2009, our chief executive officer at the time, George Miller, approached me about licensing my methodology for use in Zenith's compounding operations. George was an old-school pharmacist, a man who understood that compounding was an art and a science, not just a business. He had found the patent through a literature search and traced it back to me. I remember sitting in his office, a different energy, while he explained that Zenith wanted to formalize what was already in practice, embedded in our processes. We negotiated a licensing agreement. It was not a large sum at the time, just a modest annual royalty of $10,000. But it was a formal arrangement that acknowledged I held the intellectual property and that Zenith was an authorized licensee. That licensing agreement had been renewed 3 times since then, most recently in 2021. It sat in a file in my personal records at home. It also, I was fairly confident, sat in Zenith's legal records somewhere, though I suspected Julian had never read it, or if it had been mentioned to him, it had not registered as significant. The licensing agreement was set to expire on December 31st of that year, 4 months after Julian fired me. I did not call a lawyer that afternoon. I went home, made a cup of tea, rang my mother, and did not tell her everything. I sat in my garden for a while. I thought about Dr. Ross and his verification protocols, and about Walter's face when Julian had told him his concerns represented a fixed mindset. I thought about the patients in rural Oregon. I thought about what the 40% production increase without proper quality assurance sign-off was going to mean eventually for someone who depended on a medication being exactly right. I thought about a lot of things. Then I called my lawyer. Her name was Sylvia Ward, and she had handled the patent filing for me back in 2005. She still had all the original documentation in her office files. When I explained the situation, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Evelyn, they are operating under a license that expires in 4 months." I replied, "Yes, and they have just terminated the person who holds the patent." She chuckled softly. "Did they know?" I said. Julian did not. Whether the chief executive officer knew, I honestly do not know. The original agreement was made under George Miller. There has been a lot of leadership change since then. Sylvia said, "All right, let's talk about your options. Since they classified you as an at-will employee to avoid paying benefits, you are completely free from any non-compete restrictions. We hold all the cards. I want to be careful here because what followed was not a revenge story. I am not a person who wanted to see Zenith fail. I had spent 19 years trying to make it succeed. The company served real people with real needs. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was for the work to be done properly, for the patients to be safe, and for the people who built things to be treated with basic dignity. What I did was this. I did not renew the license. I decided to let the clock run out while we prepared our legal strategy. Over the next few weeks, I enjoyed my time off. Slept in, I walked in the park, and I spent time with my family. But I also worked with Sylvia to prepare a formal notification. We drafted a letter that would be sent to Zenith when the time was right. It was a simple, polite notice stating that the licensing's agreement for the Brooks Stability Protocol would expire on December 31st and that we did not intend to renew it under the current terms. We attached the patent documentation, the original agreement from 2009, and the renewal records. It was a clean, professional communication, but its implications were devastating. I knew that without this license, Zenith would be legally barred from using the protocol that underpinned their entire production line. As the autumn weeks transitioned into winter, the tension inside Zenith Bioformulations began to leak out through the walls. Walter Finch called me occasionally after his shifts, his voice sounding thin, cracked, and completely exhausted. He told me that Julian Croft had pushed the production line to its absolute limit, desperate to meet the aggressive growth targets he had promised to the board. The technicians were working double shifts in the clean rooms, wearing their hot, sterile suits for hours on end without proper breaks. The 40% production increase targets were being enforced with absolute rigidity. With Julian pacing the floor and checking the clocks, Walter said, "Evelyn, we are rushing the stability testing." Because Julian removed the pre-batch verification steps, we are signing off on batches without double-checking the active ingredients. I brought it up in a team meeting, and Julian told me that if I could not keep up with the pace of a modern enterprise, he would find someone who could. I felt a deep chill in my chest hearing that. A compounding pharmacy is not a factory making plastic toys. If a batch of sterile injectable medication is contaminated or has the wrong concentration, the consequences are not a bad product review. They are a hospital room or a grave. I lay awake at night, thinking of the patients in rural Oregon and Idaho, wondering if a bad batch would slip through because Julian wanted to impress the board with his growth metrics. Meanwhile, Sylvia Ward and I were finalizing our legal strategy. Under federal patent law, specifically Title 35, Section 271 of the United States Code, any unauthorized use of a patented invention constitutes direct patent infringement. We spent hours in her office, which was filled with the comforting smell of old paper and coffee, reviewing my original research logs from Oregon State University. We mapped out how my patented stability testing protocol was integrated into Zenith's software systems. We were not going to accuse them of bad faith yet, but we were going to make sure they understood the boundaries. In late November, Sylvia sent the formal notification letter to Zenith's legal department. The letter was also copied directly to the chief executive officer, Richard Vance, who was Julian's father-in-law. Richard was a man in his 60s who had built the company from a small local operation into a $94 million regional business. He had stepped back from daily operations, leaving the management to Julian, but he was still the majority owner and held the ultimate authority. The notification letter landed in Richard's office on a Tuesday afternoon at precisely 3:17. I am told by former colleagues that the response was immediate. Richard had called a closed-door meeting with the legal counsel and the operations managers. Julian had reportedly been summoned from a lunch meeting, looking confused. According to Walter, the atmosphere in the building changed overnight. The legal team had spent the next 3 days in the archives, pulling every contract and licensing agreement related to the compounding protocols. They quickly realized the gravity of their situation. The Brooks Stability Protocol, which they had been using for 15 years, was not just a piece of software or a standard operating procedure that could be easily replaced. It was the mathematical and chemical foundation of their entire quality control system. It was embedded in the formulations they submitted to the state pharmacy board and the federal regulators. It was hard-coded into the batch verification software that determined whether a compound was safe for distribution. If they stopped using the protocol on December 31st, they would have to halt all manufacturing of high-risk sterile compounds immediately. They would need to develop an alternative methodology, validate it, and submit new filings to the regulatory authorities, a process that would take at least 12 months and cost millions of dollars in lost revenue and legal fees. Richard Vance was reportedly furious, realizing that Julian had fired the one person who held the legal rights to the company's core technology. In early December, the phone calls started. First, it was the human resources director, who left a polite voicemail asking if I would be open to discussing a temporary consulting role to help with the software transition. I did not return the call. Then Julian's assistant called, asking if I could come in for a brief meeting to review some legacy files. I referred them to Sylvia Ward. Sylvia was polite but firm. She informed Zenith's lawyers that any communication regarding the patent or the licensing agreement must go through her office. She also made it clear that I was not interested in a temporary transition role. We were waiting for them to realize that their entire $94 million operation was sitting on a foundation they did not own. By the middle of December, the panic had reached the executive suite. Richard Vance had taken over the communications himself, bypassing Julian entirely. He wrote a personal letter to me, acknowledging my 19 years of service and expressing regret for the abrupt nature of my departure. He suggested that there had been a misunderstanding and offered to host a lunch to discuss how we could move forward. I handed the letter to Sylvia. She smiled and said, "They are starting to sweat. Now we wait for the meeting." We scheduled the negotiation for the second week of January, 1 week after the license was set to expire. On the second Thursday of January, the cold Sacramento rain was beating against the glass windows of the conference rooms where we sat. The storm outside was relentless, casting a gray, somber light across the long glass table. The room was silent except for the low hum of the projector and the rhythmic patter of rain against the double-paned windows. Richard Vance sat at the head of the table, looking tired and much older than his 62 years. He had dark circles under his eyes, his shoulders were slumped, and his hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a cup of water from a glass pitcher. Next to him was the company's lead legal counsel, a sharp-faced man in a dark suit, and their newly hired technical director, Dr. Charles Owens. Dr. Owens had been brought in from a large pharmaceutical compounding company in Seattle to oversee the operational transition, and he looked deeply uncomfortable in the midst of this corporate standoff. He was a competent scientist who understood the technical reality of our industry, and he knew that without my protocol, the compounding clean rooms were essentially paralyzed. Julian Croft was notably absent. I learned later that Richard had banned his son-in-law from the building that day, finally realizing that the young man's arrogance and complete lack of industry experience had dragged the company to the edge of a precipice. I sat opposite them, with Sylvia Ward at my side. Sylvia had a neat, thick stack of folders in front of her, containing the patent registrations, the previous licensing renewals, and copies of the federal guidelines that governed our compounding operations. Richard opened the meeting by looking directly at me, his voice carrying a heavy, weary tone. "Evelyn, I want to apologize personally for how things were handled. The decision to restructure the technical team was made without my oversight, and it was a massive mistake. We value your 19 years of contribution, and we want to find a way to make this right." I kept my expression neutral, refusing to let them see any emotion. "Thank you, Richard. But we are not here to discuss my employment. That relationship was terminated in September by your operations chief. We are here to discuss the unauthorized use of my intellectual property. As of January 1st, Zenith Bioformulations has no legal right to use the Brooks Stability Protocol in its compounding operations. Yet, my former colleagues tell me that the production line is still running and using my verification software. Sylvia stepped in, her voice calm and authoritative, slicing through the tension in the room. Under Title 35, Section 271 of the United States Code, Zenith is currently committing direct patent infringement. Every batch produced since January 1st is a separate violation. We have documented these runs, and we are prepared to file an emergency injunction in federal court to halt all manufacturing immediately. We will also seek treble damages for willful infringement under Section 284, since notified of the patent rights in November. The company's attorney shifted in his seat, looking at his notepad. Unable to meet Sylvia's gaze, Zenith's lawyer went pale, clearing his throat before leaning forward. We acknowledge the patent, but we believe the original employment contract from 2006 had a standard shop right provision that allows the company to continue using the technology developed during employment. Sylvia shook her head, a cold smile touching her lips, and pulled a document from her folder. The shop right doctrine does not apply here. The Brooks Stability Protocol was developed in 2003 and patented in 2006. Before Evelyn joined Zenith, the original contract from 2006 explicitly excludes prior intellectual property. Furthermore, the company signed a formal licensing agreement in 2009, which was renewed 3 times. By signing those agreements, Zenith explicitly recognized Evelyn's sole ownership of the patent. You cannot claim a shop right on technology you have been licensing for 15 years. The room went dead quiet. Zenith's lawyer looked at his papers, then at Richard, and slowly nodded, admitting defeat. Dr. Charles Owens spoke up, his voice quiet but filled with urgency. Without this protocol, we cannot clear the stability audits for our high-risk compounds. Our largest client, Peak Health Solutions, has a $70 million contract that requires compliance with these specific standards. If we halt production, we lose the contract and face massive legal liability. We cannot afford a shutdown. Richard leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face with both hands, looking utterly defeated. What are your terms, Evelyn? Sylvia distributed a sheet of paper outlining our proposal. The terms were firm but fair. First, the licensing fee would be increased from $10,000 a year to $100,000 a year, reflecting the actual commercial value of the technology to a $94 million operation. Second, the pre-batch verification safety protocols that Dr. Alistair Ross and I had built must be formally reinstated and documented as non-negotiable operating procedures. Third, I would be retained as an independent consultant at a rate of $200 an hour, with a minimum of 10 hours a week to oversee the quality control and ensure compliance with federal standards. Finally, I would have veto power over any future modifications to the stability testing procedures. Richard read the terms slowly, then looked at Dr. Charles Owens. Charles, are these terms reasonable? Dr. Owens nodded immediately. Yes, Richard. In fact, having Evelyn as a consultant is the only way we can guarantee the safety of our compounds and keep the Peak Health contract. Reinstating the safety protocols is also essential to prevent regulatory issues. Richard looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. We agree to your terms. I will have the legal team draft the formal agreement today. I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out of the room. I had stood my ground, protected my work, and ensured the safety of the patients. I felt a great weight lift from my shoulders as I walked out into the cold rain, knowing that the safety checks were back in place. The aftermath of the negotiation was swift and clean. Julian Croft resigned from Zenith Bioformulations. In February, his corporate career cut short by his own arrogance. Richard Vance had made it clear that there was no place for him in a company that required actual competence. Dr. Charles Owens took over the operations, and under his leadership, the atmosphere in the lab changed. The pre-batch verification steps were restored, and the technicians were no longer forced to work under dangerous production pressures. Walter Finch called me to report that they had even installed a high-quality espresso machine in the break room. a small sign that management was finally starting to treat the staff like human beings rather than line items. In March, I was invited to speak at the American Pharmaceutical Compounding Symposium in Chicago. The topic of the session was intellectual property protection and quality assurance in compounding pharmacy operations. It was a subject that had, thanks to my recent experiences, become highly relevant to independent pharmacies across the country. I stood at the podium in a large hotel ballroom, looking out at hundreds of my peers. There were independent pharmacy owners, clinical researchers, and young formulation chemists who were just starting their careers. The room was packed, and the atmosphere was charged with interest. I did not speak about revenge or corporate conflict. I spoke about the work. I talked about why we do what we do, about the patients in small towns who rely on us to get the formulations exactly right. I explained the technical details of the Brooks Stability Protocol, showing how mathematical modeling could prevent chemical degradation and save lives. I also talked about the importance of documentation. I told the audience, your knowledge has value. The protocols you design, the systems you build, the safety checks you implement, they are not just administrative tasks. They are your intellectual assets. Document your work. File the patents. Keep your records. Do not assume that because you love the work, the company will protect your legacy. You must protect it yourself. If you do not value your own expertise, no one else will. After my presentation, a young woman in her early 20s came up to the podium. She was a junior chemist at a compounding pharmacy in Wisconsin, and she looked at me with a mixture of awe and curiosity. She asked, "Dr. Cross, how did you stay so calm when they fired you? How did you not just scream at them?" I smiled and took a sip of water, looking at her eager face. Because screaming would have made it about my anger, and the work was never about me. The work is about the patients who need these medicines. By keeping my records in order and knowing the law, I did not need to scream. The documentation spoke for me. She nodded slowly, writing my words in her notebook. It was a gratifying moment, realizing that my 19 years of experience could help guide the next generation of scientists, teaching them to stand up for their rights and their science. Later that evening, I sat in my hotel room, looking out at the city lights. I opened my personal email and found a message from Walter. He had attached a scan of a card that had arrived at the lab in Sacramento. The card was from a woman named Sarah, who lived in a small town in rural Idaho. Her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, had a rare metabolic condition that required a custom compounded thyroid medication. The medication used the stability protocols derived from my protocol. The mother wrote to say that Lily had been doing wonderfully for 3 years, and she thanked the lab for their dedication. She wrote about how Lily could now run in the park and play with her friends without getting tired, and how much difference the consistent dosage had made to their family. She even attached a small photograph of Lily smiling, holding a drawing of a flower. I stared at the card for a long time, feeling a lump in my throat. That was the real measure of success, not the parking space, not the corporate title, and certainly not the approval of people like Julian Croft. The true value of my work was in the health of a little girl in Idaho who was thriving because we got the formulation right. My name is Evelyn Brooks Cross. I am 50 years old, and my patent is now licensed to 9 compounding operations across the United States. I consult for 3 of them directly, helping them design safe, compliant stability protocols. I am currently working on a new research project with a team at Oregon State University, developing a methodology for pediatric compound stability. We are focusing on liquid suspensions for children, ensuring that the active ingredients remain evenly distributed over a 30-day period. And this time, I am making sure that my name is clearly and permanently attached to every single document. Julian Croft thought he was throwing away a disposable employee. He did not realize that confidence is never a substitute for competence, and that some names are written in ink that does not fade. I am back in the lab, where I belong, doing the work I love and making sure that the science always comes first. In the end, protecting the safety of the patient is the only thing that truly matters, and I will continue to defend that high standard with every single batch we compound.